Hello there, this is James Scroff, it is 1978, and before we begin, it's important to note that the reason why no one can ever seem to define fascism, the reason why it has long since become a meaningless buzzword that people throw around and increasingly ignore, is that as I explain at length in my audiobook that you can listen to for free here on YouTube at the link listed down as the underbar, we all labour under the self-righteous conceit that only other people, specifically those who we distrust, hate and fear, can ever be genuinely bad, evil and what have you, that no matter what we say or do, we and the people who we like and support always have a valid reason, a legitimate excuse, or at the very least can point to the other and say, but what about them? They are obviously so much worse than we are, so why are you picking on us, officer? But far from being an irrelevant bug that makes it difficult to identify who is and is not a fascist, this self-righteous projection is the defining feature of fascism because, to quote Tom Hiddleston, every villain is a hero in his own mind. Although many of us still cling to the comforting myth that Hitler and Mussolini were simply megalomaniacs who imposed a tyranny upon their respective countries because they somehow got off on it, while that is true to some extent, those men both sincerely believed, along with millions of other Germans and Italians, that socialism and communism were deadly existential threats, both to their own countries and to the rest of the world as a whole, meaning that they were protecting and saving their countries. And although once in office they each rewrote history to pretend that they had risen to power through triumphant and glorious force of arms and strength of will befitting their greatness, the mundane reality is that both tyrants were simply given power by weak leaders, including conservative and centrist politicians, who were just as terrified of socialists and communists as they were, and who rallied behind what they perceived at the time as being the lesser of two evils to preserve the status quo. So while the comment that I received on a video last year insisted that we can't describe Boris Johnson's proroguing of Parliament that year as fascist because fascists seize power without asking permission, that is simply gross ignorance of the facts. And on the contrary, when you understand the fundamental principle that fascists perceive themselves as the righteous defenders of their superior nation and its quote-unquote true people from the evil invading and infiltrating horde, and that in times of national crisis that's how what we describe as right-wingers and centrists perceive them as well, then the reality of fascism becomes obvious. In a nutshell, in fact, fascism is the angriest, most resentful, most entitled, and most threatened, in inverted commas, voters in a democracy, the ones near the bottom of society who feel that they have the most to lose from equality, diversity, and change in general, and yet arrogantly believe that they are naturally superior, declaring that if democracy means letting inferior outsiders have power over me and take away my country, then sacrificing democracy may be necessary to preserve the greater good. For example, angry white and Christian, or at the very least culturally Christian men in what we describe as predominantly white countries, Orthodox Hindus in India and Zionist Jews in Israel, not usually wearing swastikas and jackboots or otherwise declaring that they are fascists in this day and age, especially not in Israel, because just as society has now apparently decided that it's only real racism if you wear a Klan hood or say the N-word, we've also apparently decided that while the EU is fascist, for example, because we say so, we can't possibly be fascist if we don't actually say that we are, right?